Hello and welcome to the latest Royal Roundup from TalkTV. So pop the kettle on. This is The Royalty. I'm Sarah Hewson. Coming up on today's show, the royal family have been on song across the globe. We'll be discussing the King's historic state visit to France and the Prince of Wales in the United States. Plus, as Thomas Markle goes public again, we ask, will Meghan continue to ignore her father's pleas? Joining me to discuss all of that and much more, our royal commentator and TalkTV regular Afua Hagan and the former royal editor at The Sun, Duncan Larcombe. Hello to both of you. Now, King Charles has made history by becoming the first British monarch to address the French Senate. And he used his speech in both French and English to declare global warming as our most existential challenge. Made on the same day, Afua, that Rishi Sunak rode back on pledges made on environmental targets. Of course, the King can't comment on that. But this speech was historic, wasn't it? And delivered, both in French and English, much to the rapturous reception in the Senate.
Absolutely. I mean, when he entered the Senate, he got almost a 2-minute standing ovation. He looked quite moved and quite emotional at that. And some of the speech was in English, some of it was in French. He talked about Queen Elizabeth II being the golden thread between the two countries, saying that Britain and France will always be really good friends. I mean, of course, they are our closest neighbours. And like you said, talked about climate change being a huge challenge that we're all facing. He would never and could never comment on Rishi Sunak's decision to repeal back a lot of those climate change issues, but it was still quite pertinent that he mentioned it at this particular time. And yeah, you know, he also apologised for interrupting their holiday. I don't think the French Senate's supposed to be in season and they've come back for this particular speech for the King. So he got a few laughs for that as well. But yeah, you know, almost a 20-minute speech, very wide-ranging. And, you know, he's really about putting his mark on the world as the King, as this global statesman. And I think this was a great way to start that off, a great introduction.
And Duncan, this is the second attempt at this visit. It was due to happen 6 months ago, had to be postponed with the riots taking place in France. But we've very much seen France and Emmanuel Macron rolling out the red carpet for the King and Queen.
Yes, I think it's quite... It sort of shows the value that we have by having a king as opposed to a president or whatever, because obviously when the Queen died, Macron made a statement and there was a real sense of that. But it's soft diplomacy at its very best. Let's not forget, one of the main priorities that Rishi Sunak has actually mentioned is stopping the small boats coming over from France to the UK. And you know, it shows how having a king can perhaps plough through that in soft diplomatic terms.
And trying to rebuild relations with our closest neighbour post-Brexit as well.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Afua, in terms of the welcome, we saw them at the Arc de Triomphe with the flags flying, the Patrouille de France and the red arrows flying overhead, and the King lighting the eternal flame. Another first in something like 30 years, I believe. I mean, there have been so many spectacular images already, and we're recording this on Thursday, so we're only sort of halfway through this visit.
And all these things are so particularly symbolic, lots of firsts. You know, of course, Prince Charles has been to France loads of times and Queen Elizabeth II visited 13 times. And so it's really about putting his mark on his stage of the monarchy, and so much important and symbolic imagery coming out from that, but also very tight security in Paris. You know, like you said, Duncan, the reason why this was postponed was because the riots that took place earlier on this year in France because of President Macron's pension. He put in some pension rules that people didn't like, and so there was protests and riots on the streets of France. And so you have really, really tight security in Paris at the moment. Yes, you did have, around the Arc de Triomphe, you had loads of military, you had military bands and stuff, but you had no members of the public. And all up the Champs-Élysées was, you know, very, very quiet, eerily quiet. But like you said, all this beautiful imagery coming out. You know, the King and Queen coming off the plane as well. Queen almost getting her Philip Treacy hat blown away. All these really iconic images, which we'll be looking at for years to come.
Actually, and you mentioned those images of the Queen coming off the plane holding onto a hat. And there was a moment between her and Brigitte Macron when they're coming down the steps at the Élysée Palace and they held onto each other's hands. A bond between these two ladies.
Yeah, definitely. And also we're seeing much more sort of amiable and very relaxed looking King and Queen. I remember when Barack and Michelle Obama visited Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip, and Michelle Obama sort of went for the side hug and everyone was like, oh my goodness, royal protocol broken. But we're seeing that repeatedly.
Emmanuel Macron's doing a lot of hands on the back,
a lot of that, a lot of little gestures, a lot of this, and of course we've seen.
To do that, please. It's my back.
And of course we've seen, like you said, Brigitte and Camilla holding hands, walking down the steps. Look, it's lovely to see them all so much more relaxed, and this is kind of what we want from our statesmen. Yes, we want them to be regal, and we want them to be, of course, on top of the game, know what they're doing, but of course we want them to seem human and relatable as well.
Well, there was a tweet I saw this morning from Emmanuel Macron, and it was of their walkabout because, as you mentioned, Afua, there was a lot of security. So around the Arc de Triomphe, the members of the public couldn't get there. But they did go and do a mini walkabout near the Élysée Palace, the King and the President. And the video was posted by Emmanuel Macron, just said, this friendship. And that is what this is all about. And Afua, let's talk about the State Banquet, the kind of centrepiece of this, taking place at the Palace of Versailles. And the outfits, the choice of outfits. You mentioned Fiona Clare, one of Camilla's most trusted designers, a British designer. Yeah. But for the State Banquet, she chose French.
She chose Dior, and boy, did she choose well. What an incredible outfit. I mean, my goodness. I actually think this is the best look I've ever seen Queen Camilla wear.
The cape dress.
The cape dress, or the cape with the dress underneath. The King George VI, the necklace that she added, I think the bracelet in the ring, that was given to Queen Elizabeth II and therefore given to Queen Camilla. Just absolutely stunning. I mean, the Dior craftsmanship is unmatched. And again, we saw some lovely moments with Brigitte helping Camilla with the cape. I think they had some of the leftover storm that we had yesterday, so it's quite windy. So kind of managing with that cape, but just beautiful.
Now, there's been some commentary, Afua, about the fact they were both wearing navy and whether that was a fashion faux pas.
No. Not in this case, not at all. Both outfits were absolutely stunning. I think it was actually really nice that they tied in and wore very similar colours.
And so you think that was deliberate?
I think it was deliberate. And there's a really gorgeous picture of the two men sort of turned into each other, having a little moment, and the two women standing on their side, both in the navy blue. Spectacular picture. Brigitte looked gorgeous as well. So I don't think it was a faux pas. I think they might have planned it, and they planned it well. And just one more time.
A sign of unity.
Yes, definitely. And one more time for that Dior outfit. My goodness.
Yeah, it
beautiful.
Was splendid, spectacular. Yeah. It really was. Duncan, I do need to ask you about the guest list for these things, because walking up the red carpet were perhaps some unexpected faces. We had like Mick Jagger.
Mick Jagger, Hugh Grant.
Didier Drogba.
Of course, naturally, yes.
Arsene Wenger. Who chooses? How do you get on the guest list for one of these things?
These official visits, we've got to remember, they're not King Charles saying, do you know, Camilla, I fancy going to France tomorrow. That's not how they come about. They are organised.
Hop on the Eurostar for a weekend in Paris.
Yeah. They come about as a result of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and they're very much at the behest of the British government. So the guest list and the... it's not quite called Britannia as we remember, but that sort of thing. The guest list of celebrities, the British people that be there joining, would have been decided by the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, but okayed by the Palace. So I'm sure King Charles would have had an influence.
Now, ahead of the King and Queen's visit to France, we had Prince William on a 2-day trip to the United States to promote his Earthshot Prize. It has been deemed a great success by sources close to the royal. Duncan, what about the kind of reception that the Prince of Wales received in New York? Because given all that has been going on in America with Prince Harry and the Netflix documentary, the publication of Spare, the revelations about the breakdown of that relationship, might he have been feeling a little apprehensive about this visit?
Well, I think Look, we remember Harry and Meghan going to New York to receive an award, and Meghan went and read a book to children in a school in Harlem. For me, it reminded me of the differences now between the two of them. Meghan went there because it's brand Harry and Meghan, and it was about them. I think we've seen with Prince William that it's about him using his royal status to focus attention on something else, i.e. his Earthshot Prize in this particular example. And I think it showed that contrast between former royals trying to promote themselves and an actual royal, an actual future king.
I mean, it has been pointed out on social media that William managed to go for a jog in Central Park completely incognito, whereas Harry and Meghan couldn't leave an awards event without being chased by paparazzi.
Yes, quite. And I think for Prince William, probably it underlines the division between him and his brother as well. I mean, it wouldn't have been nice for William to be in America and not see his brother. And you feel recently with the Invictus Games, what a shame relations aren't good enough for William to add his support to that. And equally with William going to New York, what a shame that relations aren't good enough for Harry to lend some support to the Earthshot Prize. It just seems like it highlights the damage that's been done by this rift within a family.
But this visit to New York, Afua, really marking a shift in status for Prince William, from the Duke of Cambridge to the Prince of Wales and our next king.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, like I said with King Charles III, it's all about him putting his mark on the global stage as a future leader, as a global statesman. And the Earthshot Prize is a brilliant way of doing that.
Tell us a bit about the Earthshot Prize and what it is.
The Earthshot Prize is basically a £1 million fund, and it's given to 5 people in the end. They've got 15 finalists at the moment, and that was down from 1,000 entries from 6 continents across the world, down to final 15, then a final 5, and they win a grant. And the grant basically is about research and development into solutions for environmentalism. So whether that is waste, whether that is sustainability, different areas within environmentalism, basically about making our world better.
Cleaner air, cleaner water, for example. Some really interesting moments.
Yeah.
We saw the Prince of Wales wading into the Hudson River in waders, rubber gloves and a life jacket.
For oysters, wasn't it?
Yes.
Putting oysters, I think, back in the Hudson River, and they want to, I think it was a billion oyster plan or a million
oyster project.
Yep.
And they collect the oyster shells from New York restaurants, empty oyster shells. They then grow baby oysters. I've probably got the terminology all wrong.
But
and they put them back in because they filter the water.
I loved the way that William sort of donned that outfit and showed that it's not, he's the Prince of Wales now. He can still roll his sleeves up quite literally and get mucky and make points there. Whereas contrast that to his father in France, and you can see how, if you like, it's kind of shifted now, where you've got the king and the Prince of Wales. It's moved along the generations, and I thought that was quite telling. How William was. I thought it was a very clever bit of PR spin by the palace to show that I'm just William in my waders.
Yeah, hands on.
Yeah, putting oysters back in the Hudson River. Why not?
Meanwhile, back in Blighty, the Princess of Wales dazzled on a trip to a Royal Navy airbase in Somerset. Her visit comes just weeks after the King announced her appointment as Commodore-in-Chief of the Fleet Air Arm. And there was a nice moment. She got quite a shock when she put on the life jacket, didn't she, Duncan?
Yes.
Pulled the toggle to inflate it, and
I think she knew that was going to happen, but
there was a giggle from her.
Yeah.
It was a very human moment.
It made some great pictures.
And what are these visits about? What are the purposes of these visits? Because obviously we've got a lot of great photographs of her in the simulator and the control tower and whatever else. But what does it mean to receive the Princess of Wales,
Well,
for example?
it's for organisations. I mean, there are the supply and demand now of royal jobs. The demand far outstrips the supply. Now, we don't have the Queen, we don't have Prince Andrew, And obviously we don't have Prince Harry. So there's a lot of good causes and organisations that need that royal spotlight, that are affiliated to the royals through patronages and so on. And I found it quite interesting that whilst William's away in America, Kate still is carrying out engagements, solo engagements. It's like the work still goes on.
Yeah, now that's interesting, isn't it? Because we talk quite a lot about the coordination of diaries to make sure nobody overshadows anybody else's work. But there was no danger of that here. Does that suggest to us that they're both very much at ease with what they're doing?
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Both agree.
Yeah, definitely. Doesn't often happen.
No, that's okay. We can argue.
But yeah, definitely. I think it shows that they are very secure in their work. But also, like Duncan so rightly said, there's so much to do and there's less of them doing it.
And they have been accused, we have to say, that the Waleses have been accused of taking too long off over the summer and not doing enough work. But we've very much seen them, you know, term started, back to work.
It very much is like that. And, of course, that was just like the Queen. She would really pretty much do nothing really in August until the middle of September. So we've seen once the Royal Diary engages, it goes and it goes and it goes.
Yeah.
Thomas Markle has spoken out again this week in an interview in an effort to see his grandchildren for the first time. Meghan's father, who's 79, appeared on Good Morning Britain, where he begged his daughter to let him see his grandson and granddaughter, adding that he hasn't seen her for 5 years. I don't know how I feel, Duncan, watching these interviews with Thomas Markle, because he's obviously not a very well man. He's had a huge amount of health troubles. He is obviously very, very hurt by the breakdown of the relationship with his daughter. But at the same time, he did, in her eyes, betray her and betray her trust publicly. And then the interviews, do they help?
Look, I mean, let's be honest. Let's think of ourselves, right? If I hadn't spoken to my dad for 5 years, because I'd gone to the press and, heaven forbid, been involved with paparazzi, which is what Thomas is accused of, I might want to find at least somebody that could have a quiet word on my behalf to say, Dad, I miss you. I mean, going back on television once again to say, and just the act of doing that publicly, it's not going to work, Thomas. Yeah. And I understand that he's not a particularly well man. But what's wrong with the guy if he can't realise that reaching out to his daughter is best not done through contact with newspapers and with television?
The thing is, every time he does an interview like this, it sets him further and further back from what he wants, which is a reconciliation. But I think there's two issues here at play. First of all, Thomas Markle doesn't seem to realise that this isn't the way to get in touch with his daughter Meghan. But there's also a responsibility for people who put him on air. I don't know why that is continuing to happen. He's clearly not a well man. This is clearly not the way to get that reconciliation. So he needs to just stop. And I mean that in the most respectful way possible.
He said in the interview he doesn't recognise any of the things that he's said to have done wrong, and I guess feels that he's exhausted every other avenue. But I agree with you, Duncan, going on television is certainly not going to be the way to break that deadlock. Let's just reflect briefly back on the Invictus Games. We talked about it last week, but we had the culmination of it on Saturday, Afua. We had the closing ceremony and a really emotional speech from Prince Harry at the end.
Oh, definitely. A hugely emotional speech. It was a very emotional week, actually. I think Harry's birthday on Friday as well. People singing happy birthday to him. You know,
but I'm sorry to interrupt, but can I just interject, but no public good wishes from members of the royal family for his birthday?
Well, this is the thing. The last time they wished him happy birthday on social media, as it were, was 2021. And last year it was in that period of mourning of the death of the Queen, so that nothing really happened in that period. And they said that typically takes a couple of years for non-working royals, as it were, people who need to step back, to stop them wishing happy birthday. So I wonder if that's why, or I wonder if they just didn't want to. If the rift plays a part in that.
Do you think they've done it privately?
I really hope so. I hope the WhatsApp group was a like
the King,
memes and celebratory emojis. I hope so. I really, really hope so. But back to the Invictus Games, and yes, a very emotional end. Harry giving a speech, you know, the USA team came out to Born in the USA. And obviously a lot of looking forward to Whistler and Vancouver in 2025, which is going to be the first winter Invictus Games. But I think it was a brilliant, brilliant end to the week in which we saw Harry really at his very best and securing his legacy.
I mean, Duncan, you've followed Prince Harry for many, many years now. A lot of the talk was that we saw glimpses of the old Harry again in Dusseldorf. Did you see the same?
Yeah, I mean, I think Harry's in his element, isn't he, when he's around wounded servicemen. He's got that bond. We, at the Sun, when I worked at the Sun, we had the Sun Military Awards, and Harry came along, and, you know, there were lots of celebrities there, and they'd all do their bit, which was fantastic. But I can remember one of the guys who was wounded saying, I said, did you meet up with Harry tonight? And he said, yeah, Harry licked my face. So it's that interaction.
Not many people can say that.
No, so Harry.
But the military gave him the opportunity to be normal, to be one of the lads.
I'm saying that because I'm not saying Harry originally, you know, is at his best when he's licking people's faces. But it's that down to earth. I'm not Harry. I'm just here to support. It brings the best out. And I think whatever anyone says about Prince Harry and however anyone feels about Prince Harry at the moment, it did again show him absolutely what a triumph for him. Full credit.
The difference that he has made to so many lives through that Invictus Games is really, really remarkable.
Yeah.
We're going to end with a lovely story about a group of cyclists who've shared the extraordinary moment they ran into King Charles while cycling on the Balmoral estate. The King was walking on his own and didn't mind stopping for a quick chat.
But I like my walking. I want to get a few things on the way down.
Good for the soul.
Well, we'll be staying in the Gouldashire Bothy tonight.
You are?
Yeah. We left all our stuff there, so...
But I'm so glad it works all right, I think, because it's...
It's really nice, yeah.
We renovated it a bit with the help of people from Ballater. So I'm trying to get more trees to grow around.
Yeah, it's looking lush compared to what it was a few years ago.
Now, Afua, this video is really wonderful. We've got these mountain bikers and they're cycling up Loch Nagar.
Yeah.
Now, that is a mountain that King Charles wrote his children's book about, isn't it?
Did.
The Old Man of Loch Nagar.
Yeah, not far from the Balmoral estate in Aberdeenshire. And so they were cycling there and they saw him walking. He had a bit of a convoy of cars, but they were like, oh, you know, why are you walking? You know, did they kick you out of the car? And he's saying, no, he really enjoys walking. Everybody else got a lift and they were just chatting with him, just quite normally. But I'm glad that they recognised him, unlike that photographer from that funny story that was talking to Queen Elizabeth II about Queen Elizabeth II and completely didn't recognise her.
Wasn't that the moment where was it some American tourist who said, do you know
the
Queen?
Queen?
And she said to her bodyguard, no, but he does.
Yeah.
Which was lovely. Yes, they did recognise him and had a chat with him. Very British. They discussed the weather.
Of course.
They were also going to stay in the Bothy, the sort of refuge for hill walkers on the estate. And Charles talked about staying there as a child and having barbecues up there. I mean, Balmoral's so special to them for that ability to just be out in the fresh air. Duncan.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm not sure how keen the King would be if that's every time he stepped out of Burke Hall and Balmoral that he bumped into to the public. But
with their phones at the ready.
But what a lovely moment. I mean, you know, we're over a year now since Prince Charles became King Charles, and I really think he's doing an incredibly, almost surprisingly good job with moments like this, mixed in with those big statesman roles as we're seeing in Paris. You know, a lot of people thought that the monarchy might even die with the Queen, but I just think now, after this first year of King Charles, it shows that the monarchy as an institution's got a long, many years left in it.
But it's interesting, is it, you talk about that, because I noticed a moment in his speech in Paris where he made a pledge, a little bit like the Queen made her pledge to serve for her whole life. And he said, for as long as I am king, my pledge. And I thought that was quite telling, his own awareness of the fact that this could be, you know, another quarter of a century, but it may not be, and so he's determined to make a difference while he can. And that is all we've got time for this week, though. My thanks to Afua and Duncan. If you want to join in with the debate, please leave a comment and make sure you subscribe if you don't want to miss a single episode. We will be back next week with all of the latest on the royal family. We hope you can join us. We'll see you then.